I am your host, Nicole Will, and we thank you for joining us as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside elders, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversations. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us today. We're so happy that we can have a minute to visit and hear about how this path found you. How did you decide to come into this field and to educate people and be a support to family caregivers?
Yeah. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me. Good question. It's always interesting when we reflect back to think about how we landed where we did. Did you ever see that movie Sliding Doors?
I did. Oh gosh, it's been years though.
Yeah. I have to rewatch it, but that's kind of what life is, right? Different paths. I think always as a young child, I always was kind of rooting for the underdog, rooting for people that were having difficulty. If a kid seemed lonely on the playground, I was the one who wanted to go over and see what was happening. So probably some of it's just in my genetic makeup. Um, I originally started out to be a teacher. Then I decided I didn't want to go into that line of work because I started teaching at a group home for foster kids. And then I got interested in the lives and the stories of these children. So that led me into social work. And then it wasn't until I was moving from one city to the next and just sort of randomly looking for a job that I got a job at a hospice, home hospice center. We were on the road doing hospice work, palliative care work, and then I started working with older adults, and then I just kind of started realizing that that was where I wanted to go, was in the world of older adults. But I've done all types of work with caregivers, from foster parents to domestic violence, homeless shelters, mental health, hospice. I mean, I've done a lot, but for the last almost 20 years it's been older adults.
Yeah. Well, it really gives you that depth of knowledge being in all of those different situations because really our families are made up of such diverse groups of people and life experiences that really play a role into our work with older adults. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, funny enough, there are a lot of similarities. It doesn't necessarily matter who it is you're caring for. The caregiver experience is very universal in a lot of ways. Obviously, there's nuances and stuff. But I do find a lot of the work that I did, 30 years ago, I can apply
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find, something that's come up lately, especially now with COVID changing our world, it's propelled us into situations and our caregivers are faced with health crisis, and how do we create effective contingency plans when we need to provide care for a loved one we're not able to? Walk us through what that looks like. How can we effectively do that?
Well, the most effective plans are that's the ones that are done proactively
Right.
and not in the moment of crisis. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, in the world of caregiving, a high percentage of what we do is in a reactive phase. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I am stressed out and responding quickly and have to make fast decisions, they're not always the best decisions. So I think one of the most important things is that no matter who you are and whether or not you're actively caring for somebody, you think about potential scenarios that could arise and start thinking about some sort of a plan. Plans, you want to think about like the main areas of functioning. You want to look at our physical functioning, so that's health, medical, medication, hygiene, all of those kinds of things. What kind of plan would be put into place for that if I fall ill as a caregiver, and my loved one continues to need help? You want to look at the area of the physical building in which this person is living and the upkeep and maintenance of keeping that actual space safe and effective. You want to look at the nutritional aspects of a person. So, grocery shopping, cooking, all of those kinds of things. How are those needs going to be met? Of course, you want to look at the financial aspect, who's going to pay those bills, make sure that the rent's on time, the taxes are paid, the visa bill is paid so they don't, cancel the subscription, let's say, to the, sensor that's in the house that the caregiver needs, those kinds of things. So you want to kind of like imagine your loved one in the home and think about what your loved one is doing every day, all day for about a 7-day period. And then you can kind of start dividing, okay, who could take over which task.
I like how you categorized it because then it seems less overwhelming for people. I think a lot of times it does feel very overwhelming because we're not sure, where do I even start? Where would you direct people to start? How would you how would you direct them in a way of what's the maybe the first thing that they should think about?
Yeah, and it's true. Like it does become very overwhelming. It's my husband always says to our kids when they're struggling with something, how do you eat an elephant one bite of a time, one bite at a time?
Yeah.
Because when something is so massive, you're like, I could never, take on this whole thing. But if you go little by little, so I would say just start with, writing down what the schedule is. What are you doing every day? So I wake up, oh, medications at this time. Oh, meals are at this. This is generally what we're cooking, and you don't make a plan yet. You just actually document what it is that you're doing. And then after, for let's say a week's period, things are documented, then you can kind of make your own categories to make it simpler. Like, oh, it looks like this bucket kind of fits together. This bucket kind of fits together. This bucket. And then you can look at the buckets and say, okay, who in within my entourage, people that I know could take over a particular bucket, and not to get caught up with who can do this whole thing
Mhm.
because it's massive and not very many people are going to step in and do the whole thing. So take those buckets and then start, thinking about who might be able to fit into that bucket.
I like that because then you're not putting all of that on one caregiver. You're really making it more simple and directing it to let's just who can that one person be that can take care of that one need, one specific need. And then they would be more willing, I think, to step in and to support you during that time because it's not going to fully consume their life as well.
Yeah, and I like what you said, Nicole. It's, the stepping in for a brief period of time. And I think that also caregivers get caught in, so how do I ask this person to take over these massive responsibilities? And I think remembering that it doesn't have to be long term, it can be for a shortened period of time. And approaching your entourage of people with this limited commitment,
Yeah.
and then they will be more likely, like, you know what, this is a lot for 3 weeks, but I think I could do it, especially like with COVID. Okay, so about 3 weeks you'd need help. Yeah, I could manage this for 3 weeks, or a week and a half is kind of my max. And you're like, okay, got a week and a half covered, who's in the next week and a half, and I think just putting that out there with who you ask, so they're maybe more likely to say yes if they don't think it's forever.
Absolutely. That's a good point, defining that time. I personal connection to that is I care for a woman who's elderly in her home with another gentleman. And just that companionship, I love to feel connected and helping them with different tasks. And her husband had was having a surgery. And so I had to step in every day and it was a defined I committed to it because I knew it was only going to be 2 weeks. I think it would have been really hard to know, oh, is this indefinite? I don't think I can do that. And then on the flip side, I had a medical um, surgery a month ago, and I was stepping away, and they needed to come up with a plan of who was going to be stepping into my place. So, when I was preparing for our conversation, I really identified with both of those situations, having just lived through it and how important it is because they didn't really have a contingency plan in my absence. And it was a good conversation to have of what are we going to do and who can help us?
Yeah, yeah, and with you having that personal experience of being in both sides of that scenario, that's going to help facilitate conversations even more because you'll understand people's reluctance and reservations and concerns. about what that commitment would be, and also the delicateness of even approaching the conversations, which can be hard to have sometimes.
It can be. So, how can, if we're looking at that plan and those hard conversations, ultimately our goal is we want our families to have peace of mind. How does putting that plan in place solidify that?
Well, you know that if something happens, someone can take care of it. It's like, when you have kids and you put someone on the emergency contact list. So if your kid is sick and the school can't reach you, you know that you have a neighbor who's going to go and pick your child up. It gives you, peace of mind should something happen. I mean, all of us feel good when we know there's a plan in place in, multiple scenarios, even something as simple as, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? Oh, we have chicken and rice. Well, we have those supplies. Now I feel like I can go on with my day because I know when I get home, chicken and rice, the chicken's defrosting, the rice is ready to go. My plan is in place. I mean, we all love planning. We all feel better when stuff's planned out. Well, most of us anyway.
Right. Yeah, there's like a few rare people that like to fly on the, edge of their seat. But yes, we do like a plan. It gives us that. And I think it helps our loved ones feel more secure in what's happening also, knowing that they're in good hands and that there's a plan in place should something happen.
Absolutely.
There's such a high burnout rate for caregivers. There's a lot on our plates, and stress can affect our health in so many different ways, and the ability to then properly care for our loved one, right? If we're not caring for ourselves very well. What are some of those signs that we should pay attention to when we know that we're working really hard and we're feeling that burnout come? What does that look like?
I think it's different for everybody, right? Burnout looks different. What I find so challenging right now for those healthcare providers is that there is no one else. And that just in of itself creates additional pressure and stress and makes us more likely to step out because we really know that no one else can do it.
Mhm.
There is literally no one else available. So that's making things even harder now. But I think in terms of sign and symptoms, it's really knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. Like for me, for example, when I know things are getting too much, my eye starts twitching. And
Mm,
it's usually my right eye.
mhm.
And usually when it happens in my mind, I think everything's fine. Everything's going well. And then my eye starts twitching. I'm like, okay, what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What am I not acknowledging? My body is stressed and it's like, hello, hello, Stephanie, wake up. Something's going on. So I think everyone has to just to know themselves and check in with themselves physically in their body. And then there's the general rules of, are your sleep patterns changing? Is your nutritional intake changing? Are you drinking or using drugs more than previously? Those are very typical things that we talk about, mood changes, everything from explosiveness to withdrawal and everything in between, and I think what's the most is is it different than usual? If this is your normal personality, then it's your normal personality, but kind of looking at what is different than usual.
Yeah. And also, I liked how you talked about, right, we're so individual. And really, it's taking the time to stop because being a caregiver, we're really busy. We have a lot going on. And it's getting quiet with ourselves and saying, okay, how it's that check-in, what's different, am I feeling different, am I feeling overwhelmed, what's happening, and just taking that time to notice, because I do that too, where I'm like, I'm fine, everything's fine, and it's not fine, I'm overwhelmed, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I think if we take that time to check in with ourselves, it's actually going to help prevent burnout because if we're already um, loving ourselves enough to just periodically and systematically check in, or not even periodically, on a regular basis, that means we're stopping and sitting still and slowing down, which will help our health in general, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like putting in that ritual of checking in with yourself and having some downtime to just see how you feel on a regular basis will give you a lot of information and insight and will help you prevent getting to the place where you completely fall apart.
Right. Yeah, and have that proactive piece rather than that reactive
Reactive.
crisis.
Exactly.
So when we look at, right, we're having this plan, we want to be able to walk through those different categories and those different buckets. You talked about asking those different people to step into those different roles for a period of time. How does that, if we're looking at building a collaborative team from the beginning of our loved one's journey to, where we are now, how do we do that effectively? Do you start by building that team right away? Do you wait till you feel like you need a little bit more support? And then where do you start and who do you ask to be a part of that team?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there. First of all, I always think sooner is better than later because we don't have to activate any team at any moment. So it's kind of like just knowing who you could reach out to. And I think that we don't need to put in as much thought as we think we do. Our team is in front of us. They're around us. We already know who our friends are who check in. I already know that if I say to my friend Lynn one day, "Hi, I've been feeling really down the last week," I can guarantee you tomorrow she's going to text me, "How are you doing today?" I don't need to look far. I already know that Lynn is on my team. This is a real example of my friend who will do this. So I think just kind of waking up to who is already in front of us and maybe even starting there. And then, of course, we can add additional people, healthcare providers, and I mean, the list is very broad of all the people that we could ask to be a part of our team. The other piece about establishing your team and keeping them working together is respecting what the limitations and strengths are of your team members. So, for example, my sister is not the best at financial management. She's not. She knows it. I know it. And when things happen with our parents, that's my job.
Yeah.
And I'm not resentful or angry at her, even if it takes me more time and more work at any particular time. I'm not mad at her. It's just not in her wheelhouse. She's not great at it, right? And there's other times when I hear someone say, "Oh, well, I couldn't possibly help my mom take a shower. I couldn't do it." And another sibling's like, or another child's like, "You know what? I can take that on." I think we have to be careful about being angry and resentful about the people who are willing to step up and recognize that everybody is their own person. They have different strengths, they have different limitations. And if we ask people to step in what's comfortable for them, we can find enough people to fill all the roles and to continue on in their roles because they're not out of their comfort zone.
I love how you identify that team is, we're not necessarily talking about it being a complicated healthcare, formal healthcare team that comes from our physicians and social workers we might be working with or hospice, but it really is just a term for formalizing in a way the people that come around us in our lives anyways, that are a part of our our team of people and our friendship, and being able to look at it like that there's probably already a lot of people that are surrounding us that we can pull into that and include in what that, you know collaboration looks like. That it doesn't,
Yeah.
like, I like how you said it doesn't have to be complicated. We can start by keeping it simple with identifying who's around us.
Absolutely, and that's not to say that a large team of healthcare providers and other kinds of providers. So people who could do animal therapy or music therapy. I had a client last week tell me he was going to try hypnosis because his mother was doing this like ongoing picking at her skin due to her dementia, and they tried a million things and it wasn't working. So he was going to try hypnosis. So really opening up your mind that there are lots of different interventions, traditional curative approaches, and then also very holistic and very different kinds of approaches like hypnosis. And so, yes, of course, all those team members are very important, but all of those interventions are very time limited. Whereas your team that's not complicated, the one who's around you, those are the ones who are going to really be there in the trenches with you day to day, bringing you the meals, picking up stuff for you, those kinds of things that, healthcare providers kind of like come in, but the other team sticks around and they're doing a
Yeah.
lot of stuff, a lot of support.
Right. They are. They really step in when we need them because they know us and they care about us and our loved one. What what would you say to people that might not have that friendship support around that they can draw from? Where should they go if they're in a situation like that?
That is so hard. And every once in a while, I get a call from someone who says, I'm alone. I
Mhm.
don't have any friends. I don't have family. What am I going to do? And if someone doesn't have money to pay for companions and nurses aides to be there to do that in the trenches work, like on an ongoing basis, lots of hours, then you have to start thinking about community resources and nonprofit agencies that are available to support you. It's hard though to navigate those systems when you don't understand even what the resources are that are available, or if you're limited with your technological knowledge, you don't know about googling and looking for apps for this and that. I mean, it becomes really challenging. If you have at least maybe a neighbor who might know some stuff, or someone you feel slightly comfortable with, you can maybe ask that neighbor who has you think they have the sort of knowledge to step in and just give you a couple hours and try and talk you through and find some resources, and then just step out maybe. But that's a challenge, and I mean, I don't have any magic answer. If someone's alone, it's it's very hard.
Right. Yeah, you
Yeah.
really feel for that situation when you know that they could use that support system and it's hard to know how to draw from. And I think that looking at what those volunteer organizations are and those nonprofits and hoping to connect people, I think um, we've come a long way over COVID, right? The silver lining is that a lot more is now accessible online. And so, if there can be at least that connection of having the technology to use to be able to connect with, whether it's a support group or different caregiving groups and families online can be helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you can get online, I mean, there's tons of different groups on Facebook and, some other platforms where, you just say there's one locally here where I live, and I'm on it, just as a resource. If people need me, they'll tag me for my specialty. And I mean, someone's like, "Hi, I have an extra wheelchair. Does anybody need it?" And then it's like, ding, 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 ding. Yes, my mom needs one, and I don't have the money to buy one. And I mean, it's like this incredible network. So certainly, if you have the advantages of technology, there's a lot of help out there. People are willing to give.
Right.
Yeah,
I think so too. That could
yeah.
be maybe the first step. Find someone that can help you with technology. So you have written a book, Plan for Aging Well. What what was your motivation behind writing that?
I was pissed at what I was seeing.
No, I feel like there's a different way.
um,
Uh,
I've always wanted to write a book.
mhm.
My husband's been telling me for years, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And I think just part of it was just a professional goal and something that I wanted to achieve professionally. And I started, after I started my media work and doing a lot of the TV work and web series and things, I was realizing that my knowledge didn't have to be limited to the area in which I was living, and that I could reach a larger audience to help them. And I thought a book would be a nice way to do it. And also that, I mean, the topic and the themes are in it. I just started with an area of really just anger and frustration at what I see in terms of the support for older adults. And sort of, it's kind of like, it's not a rant. I mean, there's definitely a lot of advice and guidance in it for sure. I think you got the PDF of it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely lots of advice and guidance and information. It's helpful as well. But the motivation behind it was my frustration with how limited our care and support is, and what my wish list and hopes are for the future. And I'm hoping to like mobilize and inspire caregivers and healthcare professionals to look at support with a wider lens and make some changes.
Yeah. And we'll link to that in our episode description so people can know where to find that. I think
Okay.
it's valuable. And you also founded the Erickson Resource Group, which is a clinical practice. Can you tell us more about that? What do you do with that business?
Yeah, it's focused here in Montreal, where I live, and my specialty here now are cognitive decision-making capacity assessments. And most of my clients have neurocognitive disorders, so some form of dementia. And that's a real niche specialty for legal proceedings. And I also am involved in some, I do just a handful a year because they're very draining, of conflictual and contested family situations where they're trying to decide who should be making decisions for someone who's no longer capable. And so then I'm sort of almost like a detective trying to figure out what's going on and who's the best, the most appropriate person. So that's my direct clinical practice. But I also, about 6 months ago, launched an online caregiving consulting. So now people from anywhere, I mean, really anywhere, but it's probably mostly North America where I get interest, as people can just, pay for my time virtually. And I can help guide them and talk them through approaching their parents and discussions and family dynamics and conflicts. You don't call me to say, "Hi, I live in Tennessee. Can I get a resource for Meals on Wheels?" I mean, it's not obviously specific like that. It's just your general um, stress and challenges of caregiving. And I can be like your caregiving coach almost.
Yeah. That is so helpful for people. There are so many times when I hear people say that exact thing. I wish there could be someone I could just call to have walk me through X, Y, and Z. So that is so, so important and so helpful. And I think given your clinical background, it's so nice to know that there is that specific education and knowledge behind the resources and advice that you are giving. It can be really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is it's not just the experience, that obviously it's the training, but I think mostly it's been the on the ground experience. I mean, what I studied in my master's program isn't necessarily everything that I'm seeing now, right? But all of my experience and all these years I've been working as a social worker has obviously led up to me feeling confident to be able to guide and coach people. And really, it's getting them to verbalize their expertise, their situation, their limitations, their strength, and then helping them coach a plan that's effective for them. Because what I might tell you might be something totally different from, John who calls me tomorrow. So that's where I think I've gained a good level of skill to be able to help people do.
Yeah, so helpful.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for your time today, and we will direct people to all of your information, your book, your resource, your coaching, and they can learn and find out more about you. It's so helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
So, I have to tell you about Jimmy Zolo and his new company, Joe and Bella. Our paths had crossed, and I'm so glad they did. It was such a pleasure to meet Jimmy. He is passionate about older adults. He told me that after both of his grandparents moved into a care community, his family's world was turned upside down, and they really became caregivers overnight. As you know, being a caregiver to someone close to you is often overwhelming. There's so much for you to manage, even with the support of a care community, like making sure your loved one has all of the products that they need and keeping them stocked when things run out, keeping inventory on what you have and what you don't. Jimmy also had that problem, and he was scrolling through all of these product reviews across the internet, and like most of us in the sandwich generation, we don't have enough hours in the day. It can feel really overwhelming and time-consuming and frustrating. We don't know what we're always looking for. And he wished there was a way to shop for his grandparents. Then the pandemic hit, preventing visitation to care communities, making this process even more difficult. So Jimmy decided to launch his own business to solve this problem. He founded Joe and Bella to make shopping for older adults simple. They carry everything from comfy clothes to creative gifts. They even have toiletries that can be automatically reordered and tech that makes caregiving easier. Everything all in one location. What I love, and I know you guys will love too, is that each and every product on Joe and Bella has been carefully selected by caregiving experts. Jimmy is so generous. He is giving an exclusive offer to our listeners of our podcast. You can use the promo code GATHER to receive 10% off your first purchase at joeandbella.com. That code is GATHER, GATHER, for 10% off at joeandbella.com. You don't want to miss this offer. Head to their website and check it out. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.